Hello Tech Pros, episode 171.
You need to be aware of what's going on around you and you need to be connected to that. It is vitally important and it's something that is massively overlooked in businesses and as leaders still today.
Welcome to the podcast where I chat with professionals who are getting the job done using technology 7 days a week. Each week we start with Motivation Monday. Tuesday is about productivity, Wednesday, leadership, Thursday, technology, Friday, people and communication, Saturday, entrepreneurship, and Sunday, being unplugged. All right, let's get started. Hello, Tech Pros. This is Chad Bostic, and I'm excited to introduce our featured guest today, Maggie Georgopoulos. Happy Wednesday, Maggie.
Happy Wednesday to you, Chad.
Are you ready to lead us through this interview?
I hope so.
Awesome. Maggie Georgopoulos is the leading global authority on career development for women in male-dominated industries. She's the author of the upcoming book, Up the Ladder in a Skirt, which is hailed as the book for women in challenging roles globally. A mechanical engineer who climbed up to the top of the leadership ladder, Maggie was the executive chairman of a large agricultural company responsible for 75% increase in the retention of staff through career development pathways by the age of 32. Maggie, that sounds like an awesome journey that you had, and I can't wait to hear about it. So tell us a little bit about your book before you get started.
Okay, the book is effectively a story about my journey, and Cool. Through it I've actually weaved tales of other women who have been in leadership roles, particularly in male-dominated fields, and also more obviously, advice and different ways to actually deal with things that are going on when you're looking to actually develop your career and, in particular, actually climb the leadership ladder and be a woman in leadership, and with a focus on those male-dominated roles, because even after all these years, and it's been well over a decade since I reached those heady heights, not a lot has changed, although it is starting to shift a lot quicker right now.
Good. That's great to hear. I'm a dude, of course, and I have been in the technology industry since I started working. But to be honest with you, I don't know that I was always a beacon of light and hope for ladies in the industry throughout my earlier stages of my career. And then I had a daughter, and now she's 7 years old, or she's about to be 7 years old, coming up in a few weeks. And she's so brilliant, and she's so talented, and she's awesome at STEM things. She's great at math, and she's great at reading and writing, and very creative, and very, I think she's got that engineering mindset, right, where she wants to break things down and put them back together. And I'm like, oh man, this kid can do anything. But when I think about the situation, right, especially the companies that I've worked for in the past, which have all been great companies, and the ladies that I've worked with, was I always the best example of a great person to work with, right? Or did I constantly, I don't know, just what should we do? What should we do? And so I'm very, very interested to talk to you about this journey that you've had and what we can learn about leadership and ladies in leadership and ladies in general in STEM-related fields. So I can't wait to get this conversation started. But Maggie, as you know, on Leadership Wednesday, what we always do on every episode of Hello Tech Pros Leadership Wednesday is we talk about a horrible story, specifically the story of your most horrible boss. Now, we don't want to name names. We don't want to throw people under the bus. We don't want to get critical. But we all have situations that we all can relate to of just either a horrible, horrible boss that never should have been in leadership, or a great boss that maybe had a horrible behavior in one specific time. So if you could tell us that story about your most horrible boss moment, and then we'll try to flip it around and see what we can learn about leadership after that.
But it's always a fun one sharing this one, because I've had the misfortune of having a pretty disastrous boss once. He was a bully, to put it bluntly, and had actually been banned from working in his home country. So I came across him in another country around the world, and we discovered this much later. And my misfortune was that his brother was the head of my department at the time. So I had him and his brother both at me. And basically what had happened is I'd been hired with all the fanfare and the wonders of the fact that I was a mechanical engineer and that I had, great qualifications and great experience, and he was really excited by it. And then it was almost like he became threatened by my qualifications and the fact that maybe I was after his job, which, to be honest, I wasn't. I was actually quite happily at the time enjoying just, exploring a different part of the world and doing something that I really loved at the time. Unfortunately, it turned into a really bad experience for me, because what happened is almost on a daily basis, I'd come in and it'd be, okay, so what have I done wrong now? Because everything I did, they would find some way of turning it around. And sometimes I would get blamed for stuff that I hadn't even gone near. Like, I got pulled in and disciplined once for apparently spreading bad rumours about the company in social settings. And I'm like sitting there going, I haven't been out of my flat for the last 2 months. So how on earth did I manage to do that? It would be, I would do something and it'd be wrong, and I'd watch the person next to me do it and it'd be okay. And it just, unfortunately for me, got to a point where I actually ended up with a massive depression as a result of it. So it's not necessarily the most wonderful thing. It was a major thing, but it was a great learning experience for me as well, because it taught me that, and this was something that I'd missed in my own leadership journey, just how much we really need to pay attention of how our actions can affect others, and also start to get straight as to what our actual reason is behind doing something. And, just from a career perspective, it really opened other things up for me, because I suddenly sat there and went, okay, do I really need to be here, and is this really right place for me, and why am I fighting this battle? And it helped me realise that I didn't need to fight the battle and I didn't need to be there, so I actually stepped out and found another job. But it really did open up a lot of things, especially from the perspective of working with others around leadership.
Maggie, thank you so much for sharing that story. That's, that's got to be a tough situation. Yeah. Regardless of where you came from, where you're at, what industry you're in, when your boss is constantly just like being very bullying, right? And threatening you and just blaming you for things that you didn't do. It's like, I'm always getting in trouble, even when, it's somebody else next to me that's actually doing the bad stuff. Why am I the one getting in trouble? That just doesn't seem very fair. Not very fair at all.
And regardless of your gender, it happens, unfortunately. There is still, in particular industries, really, really high incidence of bullying. And it is something that we as, leaders now or future leaders need to be fully aware of, because it may not be coming from us, or if it does, we need to understand what we're doing in order to enact it, because I'm hoping that we're not doing it on purpose. We need to be aware of the fact that it's there, and not, play a game of, because, the senior management in the organisation that was above this guy, and they were in another country as well, because this was a global organisation, they basically came back to the staff with a statement that effectively said that they were going to support him. And that statement wasn't good. Now, I wasn't the only one that this was happening to, so that in that way, there was at least support in that. But as I said, it opened up some really big things, because this organisation as a whole is actually a really good organisation, and the senior management are as well. It's just that somehow he had managed to convince them that he wasn't the evil person that people were saying that he was. So, yeah.
Man, that's a raw, tough position to be in, where you get to it's he said, she said, or he said, he said, or they said, right? Where you've got two parties with conflicting stories, and the unfortunate incident is, many times if one person is more senior, they have more tenure, or they have like a quote unquote higher ranking position in the organization, right? Who are you going to believe? Who are you going to listen to? Or worse, who are you going to take the time to listen to or take the time to believe, right? If you already have rapport with one individual and you trust them in other aspects, then like when they say that this is the way it is, I don't know. It's got to be tough. It's got to be tough for those managers hearing that and finding out later that maybe, I don't know, maybe they were right in the decision they were made, or maybe they were incorrect in the decision they were made. But that's going to be tough for everybody involved.
And it always is. I mean, in every part of the aspects of leading, one of the hardest things to hear is that something you've done or said has adversely affected somebody else. And yet it's something that we need to constantly be aware of as leaders. And this is somewhere quite often within industry that we don't make the distinction. As managers, and I make a distinction between a manager and a leader.
Yep.
Managers, we often just, we do the day-to-day tasks of the job and what the requirements are. As leaders, we need to step outside of that and think of way more. And that often means we may have to step outside of our own personality or our own preferred way of doing things as well.
So that's a great segue into leadership styles, positive leadership behaviors. So as a leader, not as a manager, as a leader, what should we be on the lookout for to identify bullying in the workplace, right? Both from other people, other managers, other individuals doing this, as well as really looking at ourselves and our own behaviors to try to identify bullying.
I think the number one thing we really need to be aware of as leaders is we need to be open to, or at least watching how our actions are impacting others. We also have a responsibility for our teams to be aware of what's going on with our teams. And quite often this is difficult, particularly when you've got a larger team or you're leading in a kind of a high-paced organisation, which quite often happens these days because we're putting more and more onto people and trying to run leaner. We often decide we're too busy to actually take time to stop and just see what's happening around us. And you can often actually pick up the initial signs of something like this happening within an environment from the way that one individual may react to another, or a number of individuals may react to another. The fact that somebody within the team may appear, for all intents and purposes, to be a part of the team, but quite often appears to be not a part of the team, in that people tend to react to them in a way that's almost like we're pretending this is okay. And if we watch carefully, we can actually pick these things up. And we often forget that as individuals, that we do have the ability to pick up how people are interacting with each other. We instinctively do it on a regular basis when we're looking at how people are reacting to us. And what we need to try and do is overlay what we're seeing, not with our personal opinion of what we're seeing, but try to put the personalities of the others in place of that as well.
So Maggie, I love how you pointed out that this tends to happen a lot when we're very, very busy, right? I have seen this absolutely many times in my own leadership style. When I get busy, when things around me are very hectic and I feel like I'm juggling 1,000 different balls and I don't know how I'm going to keep them all up in the air at the same time, I have in the past tended to say things in like a hurried manner, like we have to do this, go, whatever. And it's just, my style is not my normal style that I prefer having. It's not my preferred style, but my style of communication when I feel rushed and in a hurry is not very conducive to an open and honest feedback loop with the employees or with the other people on the team, right? And so in those cases, I have found out later, after the fact, like after things have settled down, after we got the fires put out, that, you know what, the things that I said came across like really harshly or really in not really bad taste, but in a way that resulted in the employees thinking, okay, apparently I have to do it the way that Chad told me to, and there's no way that I could like deviate from that and maybe come up with a better alternative because he said do it this way, instead of saying, hey Maggie, like we need to get this done, how would you like to approach it, right?
And quite often part of that is because what's happening is, under the stress, we're defaulting to a part of our personality preferences which we're not necessarily comfortable with. So it'll come out, it won't come out nicely, and people won't perceive it the same way, because if you've got another stress measure or those rose-coloured glasses on the other individual, they're going to take it the wrong way as well, which is why it's really important to make sure that you've got an open dialogue set up with the people you're working with, saying, listen, if I say or do something that you're not feeling comfortable with, please feel free to knock on my door or come to my desk, depending on, whether you're in an office or an open plan space, and just ask to have a quick chat with me. And we need to be open to that. As leaders, we really need to be open to that, because once again, when we're busy, we quite often go, not now, I don't have the time. You should always have the time for a couple of minutes, particularly if it can make a difference in the flow of work within your team.
Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen that so many times as an employee. As an individual contributor, I have had leaders, especially in like big staff meetings, big town hall meetings, where they say, hey, we have an open door policy. If you have any questions about the things we're talking about today, please come see me. But then when you try to come see them, they are very off-putting, right? They're very like, hey, go away, kid, not now, I'm busy. Or can you schedule something for 3 months from now, and then we can catch up when I've got more time? And it's like, well, gosh, I thought you said you wanted me to stop by if I had questions. I have questions, and now you don't want to talk about them.
Yeah. And it's hard because we're busy, and there's a good way to do that. You can always say, listen, we're all busy. These hours I will not be available to talk to you, because I like to have this time, free, so I can focus on catching up on important things or things that need to be dealt with urgently or anything like that. And there's nothing wrong with doing that as a leader, actually protecting some of your time and saying, I don't want you to knock on my door at these times unless it's an absolute emergency, like the building's on fire or something type that, that sort of level of stuff. However, any other hours of the day are open, and I will give you at least a couple of minutes of my time to actually, see what the issue is. If it turns out to be something larger, we can talk longer, or we can schedule a better time to actually discuss it. And as long as you're actually undertaking the actions that follow through on you saying that you're open, then people will believe that. And that's one of the biggest mistakes we make. We do not always put into action what we're saying we're going to do. And if our actions are speaking a different language, that's the language that people are going to follow. And that's what comes from those, quick fire instructions that says you have to do it like this, or I'm sorry, I'm too busy, I don't want to see you. Those actions are telling us, I want you to do it as I tell you to do it. I don't have the time to speak to you. You're not important enough, which, is not the message we're trying to put out.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you say following through with the actions, do you mean following through with I'm having the open door policy and I will have the conversation with you? Or do you mean the result of the one-on-ones with the individuals and the things that you promise to do? Like, okay, well, Chad will take this offline. I'll go look into that and I'll see, you know, what our policy is, or can we change? Do you mean both of those things?
Both of those things.
Okay.
And as I said, it is important to, particularly when you're busy, to make sure that you make it very clear that there is times that you're not going to be available. And then that way you've got it open in a way that works for you. So you have protected time where you're not constantly answering emails or phone calls or having people knocking on your door, but you've also got that open time where they can actually access you, they can speak to you, and they know that you're actually going to do all that you can to follow through on what's being discussed. And as long as people that you are leading feel that you are going to follow through on those things, then they will trust in you and they will understand when you have those human moments, because we are all human, and you're not as, on target, or you may suddenly snap back with something and you're like, oh God, I really didn't mean that. So you've got to allow people to actually see that and interplay with that as well.
So I always love having scheduled time on the calendar for one-on-one appointments with my direct reports. But when you get into a bigger organization where you're a manager or VP who has directors and managers underneath you, and they all have their teams of people, it can be overwhelming at times to to get that face-to-face time with all the individuals of the company, because there's just not enough time. So how do you balance the structured one-on-one time that you have with your direct reports versus the ad hoc or every now and then time that you spend with, the individual contributors who are doing the work?
I've always found that the thing that's worked best for me, as I said, is yes, you have your structured time, and yes, you have your closed time. I've found that nearly everyone that works really well and leads really well has had time that everybody's known is their protected time, and understood that just like each of the individual staff members, you need some time in order to undertake what your requirements are. Because even if you're, the person at the very top of the company, so you're the chairman of the board or the CEO or whatever, you still need time in order to undertake what you need to do. So as long as everyone's clear on the fact that, yes, you have protected time, and that's okay, and you're not going to schedule one-to-ones in that time, you're not going to deal with an ad hoc, can I ask you a question, or there's something that I'm not really happy about in that time, unless it's an absolute emergency, as in things are so bad here, I'm ready to go postal type thing.
Wow.
But I feel that as leaders, we tend to forget to do that. We tend to forget to let people that we're leading know that we also need time. And we need to communicate to that our staff. We also need to communicate to them if it's something small, if it's something like you've fired off a direction and they're looking at you going, okay, I have to do it absolutely like that. All they really need to do is go, look, I know you're really busy at the moment. Can I just clarify, do I absolutely have to do it like this, or can I do X, Y, Z? Mm-hmm. So you need to communicate to people, and once again, that comes through things that you do, and it builds up over time that, yes, sometime I might fire something at you, but it's okay for me to question that. And I've had an incidence of that. I used to be a classic for it. I have very much personality type that a lot of people will classify as very male, which is probably why I like engineering and those sort of things. But I think it's very feminine personally. But what would often happen is when I'm really in the thick of thinking things out, I would walk into the office and I would be firing directions left, right and centre as I went into my desk. And I totally missed the fact for ages that people just didn't see me as very friendly. Even though I am quite friendly, it's just that I have one of those personalities that is very, very task orientated, and I'm not very chatty, for want of a better description. And all it took was a little conversation with somebody once, because I went off on a course and I'm like, oh my God, am I really like that? I sat down with one of my, and I said to them, how do you actually see me? And they kind of looked at me and I said, look, honestly, I'm not going to bite your head off if you say I'm a monster. Right. And they opened up and it's like, look, I'm really sorry. I'm going to try harder. And it actually turned into something where I had the people I was working with laughing their heads off in the end, because I would still come in the morning because I'd been working for X number of hours before I even got into the site office at this point, because we had various sites. I'd still come in firing things that needed to be done, and I'd make it all the way to my office, sit down at my desk before I remembered that I needed to be a little bit, more sociable. So I would pop my head back out of the office and say, oh, and by the way, how are you all today? And everyone would just piss themselves laughing. And that was all that was really needed to break it all down and allow people to see that just because I tended to fire stuff at them didn't mean that I really honestly wasn't approachable. And they all saw that I was approachable on a one-to-one basis. But they were seeing the bigger picture as who I really was. And then when they realised that it was okay to talk to me and that I would do things that would try to change that, my staff became more open to actually questioning things, offering up ideas, and actually talking to me and saying, listen, Maggie, that was a bit harsh yesterday. And I'd go, oh, look, I'm really sorry. I'll try not to do that again. So, yeah, it helped to open up a dialogue. And the best way to do it is you need to take the first step.
Man, that's such a great story, because I think we've all been there, either working for someone who had that style or actually displayed that style ourselves. I have, like I said, when I get busy, I tend to just rattle off the instructions, right? Go left, go right, go center, go tall, go short, whatever it is. And people are like, good morning to you too, Chad. How are you today? I'm like, oh, I'm great. Have a great day. Carry on. And then I go to the next conference call or to the next thing, right? So I think we've all been there. So Maggie, in just a moment, I want to ask you about this career development pathways, how you increase the retention of the staff by developing career development pathways and what that really means as a leader and what does that mean to the company. But first, we're going to take a quick break and thank our sponsors. This episode of Hello Tech Pros is sponsored by Minio Cloud Storage. Minio is a cloud object storage server for developers and DevOps written in Go. The Go programming language is the emerging language of choice for modern cloud infrastructure projects, and it allows Minio to be highly concurrent and lightweight. Minio is Amazon S3 compatible, built with microstorage architecture in mind, but at its heart, Minio is simple, scalable, and supported by a passionate developer and user community. In episode 89 of Hello Tech Pros, I talked with A.B. Periasamy, one of the founders of Minio, about the importance of community support and recruiting software developers who are as passionate about their product's code as artists are of their art. Check out that episode at hellotechpros.com/89 and check out Minio Cloud Storage at minio.io. That's minio.io. Okay, we're back with Maggie Georgopoulos. We've been talking to Maggie about leadership styles and communication with the employees and how it's important to take the time to just say, hello, how are you? How are you guys doing? Having a good day? How was your night? Right? Before we jump into the bullet points of, okay, here's the action items of what we need to get done today. And here's all the things that I thought of last night, right? Or this morning on the drive into the office. And here's what we want to get done, right? We want to create that open door policy that allows people the opportunity to have conversations with us, but also like really back that up and don't just say, hey, come visit me whenever you need to or whenever you have questions, but really take the time out of your day, almost like, an instructor or a college professor would set office hours and said, okay, here's the times I'm going to be unavailable, but here are the times that I am going to be available. And then I really, really appreciate that feedback. And so Maggie shared with us some stories about soliciting that feedback from her employees and just the value that it added to her own leadership style and the changes that she's made there at the organization. But Maggie, at the intro, we talked about how when you're executive chairman of a large agricultural company, yep, you saw a 75% increase in the retention of the staff through career development pathways. So walk us through what did that mean? What kind of career development pathways did you develop, and what did that mean to your employees?
Okay, to give you a bit of a background to it, as per, I would say, a lot of agricultural companies or even farm-based companies, there really wasn't a program in place for any sort of advancement or career progress or even, just basic learning within the organization. It had been a family-based business that had grown rapidly, and they hadn't really thought about the processes that we see in a lot of larger companies today that, once again, aren't necessarily that well put together. And what was happening is they would get people in to do the job and they would roll out within, a 6 to 12 month space if we got to keep them that long. So there was a massive turnover of staff. And as you can imagine, the bottom line on that, constantly having to recruit staff, bring in temps while you're trying to get things in place, was massive, and it also affected the general knowledge of the organisation. So what actually happened is when I came in, we actually implemented a process where we got a number of the staff, and once again, it's because people see, process line work or farm work or stuff like that as unskilled labour, and I think that is a massive misconception because it's highly skilled. Because I can honestly tell you, I would have difficulty still after all these years classifying the, I think, 26 varieties of lettuce that they had to pick in the farm, and making sure you're picking the right ones and making sure they're at the right level to actually be picked, making sure they're being processed in the right way because some damage easier than others, so they can only go through certain process lines. All of that actually requires a high level of knowledge and a high level of skill that we tend to underrate, because we've been brought up through education systems that tell us you have to go to uni to learn things, otherwise you haven't learnt anything.
Right.
Which is, once again, that's another story. I get off on track. But So what we did is we implemented a program of training within the organisation, which allowed people to actually look at what they could actually, where they could go from where they were, what they could become if they wanted to actually go further than just being someone who picked, if they wanted to be someone who worked on the process line, if they wanted to eventually go into sales, because the organisation ran all of these things, whether they wanted to potentially look into being part of the health and safety, the operations, whether they wanted to step up into team leader roles or eventually into management roles. So we sat down and actually put that together, and we put together individual programs effectively for the staff that worked on where they were looking to go. So we looked at what skills they had, what they felt they needed more skills or knowledge in. So if they felt they needed a health and safety course, we made sure they got that. If they actually wanted to undertake a formal modern apprenticeship in their process line work or in their production, in the farm production stuff. This was in Australia. Australia had these programs in place. We actually got them on to, sorted these courses out so we could actually run them on site, so that we weren't necessarily losing production time in order to allow it to happen. So it was a win-win. So the staff were actually learning, they were getting recognised qualifications. Therefore, if for some reason they did want to leave, they had something they could take with them. If they wanted to move to another aspect of the business, they had something to show what they'd been doing. And as a result of this, what we found is people became more satisfied with what they were doing, because they felt that we actually were interested in them. That we were actually interested in making sure that they had, the best of what they needed, that they had, opportunities, that they were able to step up to what they wanted to be, or they weren't necessarily frowned on if they didn't want to do anything other than basically be a farm production worker. We were there to support that. And we also implemented a program to get more youth into it, because one of the big problems, and I don't think this is just an Australian issue, is a lot of kids are leaving the farms. Basically, they're going to big cities, they're taking up different types of businesses. So it's not even a family guaranteed just because dad's doing it that son or daughter will go into it anymore. And we also started to implement a program to try and get more females into the industry as well. And all of that just built up an ethos within the business, which meant that people wanted to stay and work within the organisation. So our retention turned around from, having to plug a position once every 3 to 6 months to basically needing to create positions almost in order to hire people. So it was a really, really wonderful time, actually. And it was great working with everybody and the other management to actually look at what we could do in order to turn the company ethos around to what they actually wanted it to be as well.
Man, that's an awesome, amazing story. I love that. Of just, looking, instead of looking at individuals, sometimes we look at a position and we say, okay, these positions require these skills. And so we need to constantly hire and recruit and bring people in from outside the organization to fill these positions with these skills, as opposed to, we've got some awesome people that work in this company. What all would they like to do? What all could we teach them to do? And put in some training programs in place where they could move laterally or up the chain into different roles. I think that's a wonderful. I worked in an organization one time where we had a hard time in the IT department of actually recruiting people outside of the state, because we lived in a small market in the Midwest US. And it was, if you're trying to bring really talented IT people from Silicon Valley to move to Oklahoma, that's a tough sell. Or move from the East Coast to the Midwest, where they're out in the plains and there's like nothing to do. That's a really hard sell, right? But once we implemented a process in order to train people who came in from a different role, right? Maybe they came in from a help desk role or from whatever position that they were in, to hey, we're going to have some free classes, and it's a volunteer. The teachers are employees who are volunteering to teach their knowledge, and then you as students come in as volunteers to learn the stuff. Then we actually implemented some training programs that help build the next generation of workers in the IT department. So I love that. Any stories where we get training people, that's awesome.
Yeah, and it's amazing when you do stuff like that, people buy in because they really feel like they've got a say in what's happening, and they feel like they've got control over their future, and they can help others as well. So it's, as I said, it's just an amazing win-win situation, and it really amazes me that more organizations don't do it.
Yeah, it just, from the employee perspective, for me, it felt like there were more options, right? And if I feel like there are no options, the day that I get tired of doing this work, then I'm going to go look via Google or via talking to my buddies, outside of the office, what are some other options in town or out of town. But if my employer says, hey, by the way, Chad, there are like a dozen different options for you. When you get tired of doing this job, we've got a lot more stuff that you could focus on. Then I would be way more likely to stay. Speaking of staying, unfortunately, we're run out of time for this conversation. But before we leave, Maggie, could you share any parting words of wisdom that you have for our audience, the best way that we can connect with you, and then we'll say goodbye.
Okay. To me, the number one is whether you're a leader or someone working within an organization, the most important thing is your mental health and the mental health of others, which means that you need to be aware of what's going on around you and you need to be connected to that. It is vitally important, and it's something that is massively overlooked in businesses and as leaders still today. How you can get hold of me. I'm on Twitter as @MagsInspires. I'm on Facebook, and you can find me once again under the Mags Inspires logo or under my personal name. And my website is uptheladderinnaskirt.com, which is the book, and I also have magsinspires.com. Both of them are ways for you can potentially, if you get involved in that, you can get a downloadable version of my book, which will be available soon, and eventually get connections as to when the book's coming out. And you can also just connect to me for regular chats and to find things out, because I do like connecting with people and finding out more about their leadership issues, what's been happening, or what their wins and successes are as well.
Awesome. And Maggie is all over the internet, so if you missed any of those URLs, you can just go to the show notes page for this episode at hellotechpros.com/170. Maggie, thank you so much for joining me on Hello Tech Pros today. I really value this conversation and discovery about, bullying in the workplace. We don't want to be a bully, so I think it's really important for us to be aware of, even if our intentions are pure and our intentions are good, that we might be perceived as a bully in certain circumstances. So thanks for letting us know about that.
You're welcome, and thank you very much for having me on the show, Chad. It's been a great time speaking to you.
My pleasure. Absolutely. Tech Pros, if you're in the situation where you feel bullied, you need to speak up about it. You need to have a conversation, not making threats, right? Not being unprofessional. We're all very professional, but you just need to have a conversation first with that individual and say, you know what you said here or there, maybe you didn't intend it this way, but here's how I took it. Now, did you know that I took it that way, right? And just start that conversation and see where it leads. There's probably a great chance in many circumstances that the manager, the supervisor, the whoever that was in this leadership position didn't mean for it to come across that way. So hopefully they'll say, oh, you know what? Maybe my communication style was ineffective in this manner. If you are a leader, you are a manager, and you are communicating with people, take the time to really ask them what's going on in their lives and what's going on at work, and look for, like Maggie said, look for the honest feedback, right? If they're saying one thing but they're doing another, then there's something out of check. So get really, really in touch to how people are perceiving your communication, and make sure that you're not coming across in certain circumstances as that office bully. You've been listening to Maggie Georgopoulos, and I'm Chad Bostic. And until next time, take care. The show notes page for this episode can be found at hellotechpros.com/171. Do you use Slack for team communication? Join the Hello Tech Pros Slack channel at hellotechpros.com/Slack. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review, subscribe to this channel, and check back tomorrow. This has been Leadership Wednesday, but tomorrow, my featured guest and I talk about technology. On Friday, people and communication. Saturday, entrepreneurship. Sunday, being unplugged. And then next week, we kick it off with Motivation Monday, followed by Tuesday, productivity. And then we're back again on Wednesday to discuss leadership. And I'll talk to you tomorrow.